My first day with the Sigma 28 to 105 f2.8, specifically for wedding photography today. We're going behind the scenes at a full wedding day, from getting ready coverage all the way into the reception, all with this lens. I'm not changing this lens. If I do need to change lenses, I will change lenses. It's a real wedding day, but I suspect that this is going to get me through most of today. And if you want to get my free 2.5-hour wedding photography course, as well as a free preset pack and my wedding day shot list and a few other bonus extras, there's a link somewhere if you can find it. First impressions of the Sigma 28 to 105 f2.8, very, very well built. The nice thing is it actually fits in a bag. So that is on the A9 III and a Peak Design Everyday Messenger 13 liter. And it fits nicely in there. Pro photo flash. My film things in the middle. Also, I'm going to compare this to the Tamron 35 to 150 f2 to f2.8, which is a lens that I use at pretty much every single wedding day. And I'll be making a full dedicated video about that, so subscribe to the channel if that's something that interests you. But the Cole's notes of it is that a 28 to 105, at least for me, doesn't replace the need for a longer lens like a 70 to 200, where the 35 to 150 does step into that role a little bit and doesn't require me to bring an additional longer lens for wedding day. This also all depends on the wedding days that you're usually capturing. Today we are here at Elora Mill, and while the ceremony, there might be 100 people at the ceremony, my distance to the couple without obstructing guests and being in the way, I think I can get by with a 105 at the long end. I also have one of my custom buttons set up to go into APS-C crop modes. And I'll usually only use that during the ceremony, sometimes maybe for candids to get a little bit closer. I find myself even using that on the Tamron 35 to 150 and punching into, I think it's 220 millimeter equivalent when you go into crop mode with it. And if you're shooting something like this A9 III, it kind of sucks because I think you get 10 megapixels. But if you're on something like the A7R5, you will still get a reasonable amount of megapixels, or the A7 IV, you still get more than enough megapixels, I would consider, for a documentary ceremony shot. It's probably not something they're going to be, even if they're printing, I would say a 10 megapixel image, if shot correctly and you didn't shoot it at 75,000 ISO, you're probably going to be fine to print it to a reasonable size. So I'm not saying that you go out and you buy a 10 megapixel camera and you shoot it all day at a wedding, but I think maybe we're a little bit more critical on the technical side of things being photographers than our clients would be. Hi Tim, are you here early to set up the floral arrangements?
No, I outsourced that to Allie Mac Weddings. She's doing all that work for us, so
that's nice.
We don't have to.
What you got there?
Shooting on Super 8 millimeter film, 100 ISO, Ektachrome today.
Oh, you're getting crazy.
Yeah, talking to Ryan, he said it's tough to strip the, what's that layer off cine film? I forget what it's called.
Steve, the
layer Steve off. And this is a lot easier for him to develop.
Interesting.
And he can be a little bit less delicate with the film when he develops. So Ektachrome all day, except for the evening when I switch to 500T. So
it's kind of interesting to see a bunch of companies offering unique and interesting lenses, specifically Canon doing the 24 to 105 f2.8. Actually, so this is a very compact, I would say, at 28. It feels weird to shoot a wide angle lens in a configuration of this size, but it is a reasonable lens to carry with you all day. It's also a little bit smaller than the Tamron 35 to 150, both in weight by a few grams, as well as in physical barrel size. Ergonomically, I would give this a full checkmark rating. It feels really, really nice in your hand. It's a good size. It's not too big. The Tamron is a little bit too large in the barrel, I find, and it's just a little uncomfortable. This feels really nice. Now going into the Canon 24 to 105, you're probably, if you're a Sony shooter, you're probably not considering that lens even because it's for a different system. I used it for a wedding day. It's internal zoom, which means that when you zoom the lens all the way to 105, it's this large, and this is how large that 24 to 105 for Canon is all day long, and it's also heavier, again, not by that much, but it is a bit annoying to shoot a lens of this size all day on a wedding, especially when you're trying to get some candid reaction shots and people are very, very hyper aware that you're the photographer. Whenever you have a giant lens in your camera, I would say that this borders into being a lens that people are going to be aware of, that people are going to see you across the room. Fortunately, with mirrorless, so with DSLR, you used to have to put your camera up to your face and take pictures like this, so people were even more aware when you were taking their picture, and I used to get a little shock whenever people would look down the lens and they would make eye contact with me through the camera. With mirrorless, at least you can kind of hide and get more candid shots in an easier way with your screen. I also shoot my screen pretty much all day. I'll actually be surprised if I use the viewfinder at all. Maybe if it's harsh sun. I have a button set up to go into sunny mode for my monitor, so if it does get a little bit too bright outside and I can't see my monitor well, I punch that into sunny mode. Drains a little more battery, but lets you actually see what you're doing. Fortunately, with Sony cameras, the autofocus, everything, automatic setting that it's going to be selecting for you is going to be pretty accurate, and you can trust the camera to make a mostly correct decision most of the time, or one that you can at least fix and post a little bit. I should also mention that today I am only doing photography. So a lot of the time I'll do both photography and video hybrid. So I'll do a highlight film for my couple while doing my regular photography coverage. Today, Tim is full video boy, and I am just on photography with my wife, Lindsay. So let's talk usefulness of this lens throughout the wedding day. Going into getting ready coverage, especially if you're in a smaller, chaotic Airbnb style environment, it's gonna be a pretty big lens. It feels big in a room that's small. I would prefer to be on a 35mm 1.4 prime for sure in that situation. And yes, that means that I might not get those shots at 105, but I think that the quality of coverage overall, I am happier with. The other thing to speak to is we'll talk more about the optical quality of this lens throughout this video, but you're not going to get that out of focus bokeh and that focus fall off and rendering of a prime lens. And when you are in a busy getting ready environment, to be able to shoot at 1.4 or 1.8 and make all that background disappear, it's definitely helpful, and I think that it makes your images pop even more. Today I've actually been using a little bit of flash getting ready, which is not something that I normally do. ProPhoto A10 for Sony. I will be making a comparison video, so I've been using Godox flashes for a long time now. This is my first, what I would call an expensive flash, and it's very, very, very nice, to be honest. I don't know yet if it is worth the additional cost above the Godox unit, but I am having a very nice time with it. All things considered, including the button layout, everything just makes sense. It's very simple, easy to use, creates great quality of light, and very accurate in TTL, and I'm actually shooting in TTL today, which is crazy. So overall usefulness for getting ready, very useful, but a little bit cumbersome. I would say give it my overall recommendation with the additional wide millimeters that you get over the Tamron 35 to 150. It is definitely more useful in a getting ready style environment.
A few other things to touch on. The autofocus this day was amazing. I don't think there was a single shot that the autofocus did something that I wasn't expecting it to, or that it wouldn't have done with a different Sony lens, a lens made by Sony, because sometimes the autofocus just isn't there with third-party lenses. I am very happy to say that I had no issues whatsoever. I didn't use any manual focus on this day, but the manual focus ring is very nice, as well as all the buttons, the layout, the ergonomics, and the feeling of this lens. I would actually rank above the Tamron 35 to 150. I know a lot of people are a little upset that it doesn't go down to 24mm and 28 just isn't 24, and I understand that, and as a wedding photographer, it also kind of puts this lens in an awkward area where, yeah, I need to bring a longer lens if I'm at a church, but then I also definitely need to be bringing a wider lens as well in case I just find myself in an environment where I have to get down to 24mm or 20mm. Typically a 20 is the widest lens that I will bring to wedding day, and I only use it for a few shots, but they are shots that are critical and important, such as cake cuts or just the party dance floor footage. If things are really energetic, I go really wide. So yeah, this lens takes over all of the middle focal lengths in my kit, but leaves the wide angle and long end kind of untouched.
Thumbnail.
Eat it.
Tim is doing video, Taylor and I are doing photo. Basically, unless we tell you otherwise, from now on you're just going to look at my camera and pretend they don't exist. It's a little rude, I know, but that's how it's going to be.
The 28 to 105 2.8 could absolutely be an all-day lens. I think the most popular lens for wedding photographers, I did a poll in my group a few days ago, and the 24 to 70 f2.8 came up a ton. So I think a lens like this that allows a little bonus reach for really not that much extra size, I think is going to be incredibly popular. For me as an all-day lens, today it could absolutely be an all-day lens, but if I do find myself in a larger church, I'm definitely going to want more reach. So maybe that means that if you do find yourself at smaller venues a lot and smaller ceremonies, that you go with a lens like this because you want the additional wide millimeters. But then if you do know that you have a bigger ceremony coming up, maybe that means that you're renting a 70-200 for that day.
And something that's a little bit different on the Sigma than the Tamron. So I don't really love the idea of using the Tamron 35 to 150 all day because it's just a little bit too big, a little bit too heavy. This lens, I feel like, is on my upper limit, so I feel like I am fine with using this lens all day and I'm comfortable with it. Even though the weight difference and the size difference are very marginal, it does seem to put it into a place that at least I am personally a little bit more comfortable with it all day.
Now moving into a first look is definitely a time that I need more zoom, and I think the 105 end of this, it works fine. I'm happy with it. I would prefer to have a little bit more 7200, that 35 to 150 might be a better tool for this part of the day, but I am very, very happy with the result. And you can absolutely get by for a first look and for the wedding party photos, and especially for the photos with the couple and some family photos, it is an incredible lens for all of those.
There were also a few reports of ghosting and purple fringing and some different optical errors that I didn't experience at all on this day. All the images are processed through my preset, but the straight to camera images were totally fine. And if anything, I actually really liked the straight to camera images, maybe more than the Tamron 35 to 150. Stay tuned for the end of the video where I'll be going through all the images that you've seen with my preset, but I'll be going through them all straight to camera.
Two hot tubs.
Beautiful, looking at each other, and a little bit more separation there.
I like that your car's here as a bounce.
Yeah,
It's really nice light.
It's really good lighting here.
Really pretty.
You know what? Even if
Moving into the ceremony, I love having 28mm as the wide end. I'm not used to this, and to have that as people come up to the front of the aisle, very, very happy with that. Overall, I do miss the 150mm end for at least once the ceremony's begun and I'm in the side aisles, even in a smaller situation like this. If I was in a larger space like a church, I would absolutely want something with a little bit more zoom just for the ceremony. The rest of the day, I think I'm totally fine with the 105 end, and I am happy to have the additional wide millimeters, but I personally am in the camp of wanting a little bit more zoom to get a little bit closer so I don't have to walk in front of people and make myself known during the ceremony. Some other nice things about this lens for wedding photographers, it's weather sealed, so you don't have to worry if you're out in weird conditions. Maybe weather sealing is a bit of a strange point, because if you are in a situation where it's pouring rain, you're probably not gonna have your couple out there doing photos, but it is nice to know if it starts misting or if they're under a covered space and you don't have an umbrella, you're gonna have no problems with this lens. To talk a little bit more about the build quality, you have your focus, autofocus, manual focus. There's a button for it, as well as two function buttons, and then you have a click/declick on your aperture ring, and you do, in fact, have an aperture ring, which is pretty exciting if you like aperture rings. There's also a lock button if you want to lock this at 28mm for transportation. The close focusing is also really quite remarkable. I don't love to bring a macro lens with me because I'm pretty much only using it to get a photo of the rings. So usually what I'll do is I'll just bring a 35 prime and I'll stop down a little bit so I get a little bit more depth of field, and I will use that as a macro. Maybe I'll punch it into APS-C crop mode, or maybe I will involve the rings in more of a flat lay so that I don't really have to get that macro detail shot. And while it's not a full true macro lens, I feel like this can definitely get you by on wedding days. The bokeh overall, as you've been seeing throughout this video, it's good. It's not the best. You're definitely not going to be getting the quality of a 35 1.4 GM prime or the 85 1.4 GM2. It's not going to look like that in the background. But on the flip side of that, the amount of versatility you're getting out of this lens, so yeah, maybe a couple of those shots aren't going to look as great as they could have been, but you're going to take a lot of photos throughout a wedding day that just simply wouldn't exist if you were shooting on prime lenses. Sharpness overall, I also noticed that at 28, it was pretty good. It was more than good enough. And at 105, it's actually quite remarkable. But all things considered, for the versatility of this lens, I am very happy with the optical quality. cocktail hour, this is an incredible lens, especially when stacked with mirrorless autofocus capabilities, that I'm not looking through the viewfinder, that I'm able to get a lot of great candid shots. I'm able to get some wide shots. One of the problems with candid photos, if you're on an 85 and you're wandering around cocktail hour, usually someone sees that you're the photographer and they're like, hey, can we do a group shot? And you probably have your second camera with you, so it's no big deal. But this is just a one lens solution that you can get all the candid close-up shots that you want, as well as some group shots if people want some photos of them smiling facing the camera. Moving into the reception, f2.8 I start to struggle with. So usually in a situation like this, I'd be pretty quick to switch to my 85mm f1.8 or f1.4 GM2 prime. And that helps me get closer for speeches and helps me get closer for intros and first dances without actually being in the way. So 85 I would say is a preferred focal length, which is included within this lens. What's not included is the low light performance. So 2.8 is totally fine. You can absolutely get by with it. But I would say a better tool at this point of the day would probably be something with an even wider aperture than f2.8. Again, this does come down to your personal preferences and the types of images that you like to look at. I like to look at images from this time of the day with really shallow depth of field. Again, it also helps blur out some details in the background that might be distracting, including exit signs or serving staff, or in the case of a first dance, somebody in the background that's just making a weird face or they're on their phone and they're pulling you away from the subject that you're trying to capture in the photo. But again, the versatility, so you can get the wide shot of the room, you can get reactions from everyone without moving around too much, and that is absolutely one of the strengths of this lens.
now let's go through some straight out of camera images. The 105 end of this lens, I have a very strong preference. I very much enjoy the images coming at 105. There is a bit of wow factor to some of them, which I really like. But overall, I would say that the lens is strong all the way through. As you can see in my settings over here, I'll scroll down a little bit. I shot pretty much everything, maybe everything at f2.8 today. My base ISO, because I shoot in S Cinetone, is 320 on this camera, which is a little bit annoying, but I deal with it since I have no maximum shutter speed really. For photography, that's great. For video, it's a little bit harder, but for flash photography, it unlocks some unique and interesting possibilities. All right, let's begin. So these images were shot with a Cinetone color palette, so that's why they're maybe a little bit washed out straight out of camera. If you do shoot with any color profile or picture profile, when you load the raw image in, the actual colors will come through. These are not the permanent colors on the raw file. They will reset to a more general color palette. And the reason that I'm set to Cinetone is because when I do both photography and video coverage, I like my color profile to be the same. And yes, you can split it up so that your pictures, when you're taking pictures, that there's a different picture profile on it. And then when you're in video, you get Cinetone, but you actually have to switch the dial rather than just hitting the button to record, which is a bit of a bummer. So maybe in the future that'll be solved. The outdoor images I'm really happy with. I think I expected these to feel crunchy, to lack of a better description. Usually backgrounds, they just don't feel so good when you're out in bad light and shooting what I would consider not to be a super zoom, but has a substantial amount of zoom. That was a direct flash shot that I don't think that I included. This was as well. So you can shoot whatever shutter speed you want and use flash. So my flash would have been set to maybe quarter power, and it was able to essentially overpower the sun. So it's a very different image than Lindsay would have got shooting ambient. So if you're a second photographer at a wedding, maybe consider doing something as long as you're not getting in the way of the main photographer. The lighting in this room was quite wonderful. We're getting kind of a little bounce off the cement or the stones out front, and it created something pretty unique. The lighting in this area, harder, or not hard light, soft light, but more challenging in terms of color casts. The close focusing, I did mention close focusing distance of this lens. I think I shot at, we'll go back to this here, so maxed out at 105. I was pretty close enough to get the detail shot in the cufflinks, so I'd be happy to do that with a ring or any sort of detail that I need a close-up of. If I need something that's an extreme close-up, maybe I'm gonna bring a macro lens. In my 1,000 weddings or 1,000 plus weddings that I've been to, I've never really 100% required a macro lens. So if you are somebody that is on the fence and you're like, oh, maybe this lens can fill that gap and I don't need a macro, that is a definite possibility. All right, back to the moving forwards from there. Weird composition. Inside, lots of distractions. Outside, this is the only spot of open shade you can really find for that many people. Flash shot inside, flash shot outside. Leaving, direct flash. Welcome to the ceremony. I will say that it was very nice to have a 28mm lens, especially if you're the lead shooter, to have a 28mm lens as people are coming down the aisle at you. That you can get the 105 end and then 28. 35 is also pretty good, but 28 is definitely better in that situation. One spot that I absolutely wish I had more zoom is a shot like this, or at least from kind of this side aisle. If I zoom in, you're probably going to see that this is already cropped in. So yeah, this is already punched into APS-C crop mode in my camera, and I wish that I could have got a little bit closer, but you don't really notice that it's cropped in, again, as long as you shoot it correctly. Rings, another time that would be very nice to get a little bit more zoom so that you can get the establishing shot of what's going on, but then you can also get some detailed close-ups. Ring shot, fortunately, you can usually get nice and close. It's a time during the ceremony that it's very normal for a photographer to get up there, and you're not going to be distracting. People are kind of expecting it. But sometimes there are physical limitations if they're up on a stage at a church that you want to zoom in and you can't walk up the stairs or you get yelled at by the officiant. Overall, really happy with the sharpness of this lens, the colors coming off this lens. really no optical flaws that I can see. I know that there have been optical flaws reported of this lens, but I don't know. I'm pretty happy with it. Maybe the bokeh is a little distracting here. I don't know. I think it looks totally fine. Having one lens for detail shots is also very nice, that you can get all the close-ups as well as all the wide shots, because sometimes you only have like 1.5 minutes to get all those shots and there's going to be people in the room. Again, 105. It's nice. So we came in for a little room reveal and then went back up to cocktail hour and came back down. So for entrances, I'm usually on an 85mm lens, but also usually people come in maybe smaller groups, not everybody all at once. On an 85, I would have had to have run to the other side of the reception to get this shot. So I am very, very happy that I had this lens on. Also, quick demo. This is if you're not using flash. You can fix the color a bit and brighten it up, but this is if you are using flash straight at a camera. I think it looks a lot nicer. Flash? No flash. Flash? No flash. What do you prefer? I'm starting to prefer flash, I think. 105 again? So nice. This was one of the situations that I wish I could have got a little bit wider. I think Tim was on a 16 or Lindsay was on a 16, and 28 definitely felt like a limitation. So this is the one time of the day that I always mention that you're always kind of crammed into a corner or somewhere weird for cake. And it is a shot that you have to be able to execute for your couple. Didn't change my white balance. Why would you change your white balance when there's sparklers and fire? Just leave it on shade or whatever I was on. Actually, we'll go back to this shot. So this is like holding together real well. Also, Sony wouldn't help Sigma out at all, I don't think, in terms of fixing their lenses inside software in the camera. So what you're seeing is it's nice. It looks really good. These high contrast points are just totally fine. Back inside, bounce flash off the ceiling above them. Even though it's a gray or maybe beige ceiling, I'm gonna say like a warm gray, the light comes down and it works pretty well. Flowers are caught. Bounce flash example just right off the ceiling above me. And then shots like this are direct flash. They're gonna get a little bit better in post-production, but overall, I'm pretty happy. All right, that's it. That's all. For me, I will be sticking with my Tamron 35 to 150 f2 to f2.8 because I find that it is a little bit more versatile for my exact use case. If that does not make sense to you, don't let me sway you. Oh, where'd the video go? Don't let me sway you. This is an incredible lens and I am very, very happy with it. And if you do want to get that free 2.5-hour wedding photography course and free preset pack, there's a link if you can find it. And if you already have it, you can watch this awesome behind the scenes with my friend Liam. It is a lot of fun. Come with us behind the scenes for a full wedding day.